All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm in my regular home of the internet, which is where we all live probably forever because of this pandemic. And I'm talking to someone who's new to the show and actually fairly new to me as well. I kind of discovered your music. I'm not even sure how, but I tend to try to follow as many local artists on every social media platform as I can whenever I discover a new name. So I think I have a few of your projects I've been following for a while. And, I've been listening to the latest one quite a bit. So I thought it would be cool to have you on the show and talk to you about some of these various things you got going on musically. So, I think the best way to start things off is if you want to introduce yourself and maybe just give a bit of background about what you do as a musician.
Sure, man. Well, my name is Jeff Corin. I am part of three music projects based here in Winnipeg. One of them is Dojo Cobra. I'm the bassist and synth programmer. In that band also features Kevin Hoover of Nocturnal Departure and Hell Moon.
Oh, cool.
And okay. and my friend Tim Cleaver, who played in a band called Cerulean Skies. I'm also probably the only dungeon synth artist in Winnipeg as well, under the name Calamite. And just recently, I'm now being known for being the guy behind the one-man black metal band Primordial Serpent.
Cool. And Primordial Serpent is what I've been listening to lately, as I was saying. And I definitely want to start with that, but I have some questions about the dungeon synth stuff too, because that's a genre that is new to me just entirely. But let's start with the other one. And you just put out an album, I guess it was last month, right? As your one-man band project.
Yeah, I put out Ancient Myths and Legends on Bandcamp, and that's going to be coming to CD, I believe, June 20th by a label called Narcoleptica Productions.
Oh, great.
And I believe there's also a tape release coming out in May by another label called Worship the Void.
Cool. Well, tapes are still a really big thing with black metal, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the underground aesthetic, right? So it's not very uncommon to see somebody who's into black metal owning a lot of tapes by black metal artists. So
yeah. Well, I guess like the first thing I was curious about is what are the logistics behind being a one-man black metal band? Because I mean, you hear about the idea of it and you think, oh, it's probably just some guy, screaming with a guitar, but there's a lot more going on these tracks than just that. I mean, are you playing just all of these instruments and putting it all on, layering it on top of each other, or what's the process?
Yeah, basically what I do is I just write and record a bunch of riffs, and then I just kind of piece them all together and kind of form a song out of it. And then when I have something that's relatively concrete enough, I just start adding the bass tracks, and then start adding like lyrics that kind of fit to the theme of the riffs, and then I start mixing it all together and programming it, and then just kind of take it from there, pretty much.
Cool. Did this come out of necessity due to the pandemic, or had you always wanted to do a solo project like this?
I'd say part of it was mainly what it was that back in the summer of August, I'd recently just finished recording Path of the Dragon for Calamite. And a lot of people in the dungeon synth scene were also kind of starting their own solo black metal projects. Kevin was also starting his own black metal project too, called Hell Moon. Which I have news about that, by the way.
Cool.
And with Dojo Cobra being on hiatus because of the COVID pandemic, I was just thinking like, well, maybe I should start my own like metal project. So then I just started writing some black metal riffs, some black metal songs, and then from there I ended up having like 6 or 7 tracks and decided, oh, I got enough for an album. Okay, well, I'll release this as an album then. So
cool. And so is this something that's always going to remain a recording project only, or do you have any ambitions to kind of make this a live thing as well, presumably with more people involved?
You know what, I'm not so sure. The future is always unwritten, so if it stays like a basement project, that's totally cool. If it ever goes to the stage, that's cool too. So yeah, as long as I continue to make music, that's all that really matters to me.
Well, it seems like you have your hands full already with the amount of music you're making.
So, yeah.
That's cool. Well, and it's kind of good too, because I mean, like, I think that over the course of doing this podcast, for the past year or so, I've been talking to people who are stuck at home during the pandemic, and it's kind of been one way or the other. People are either really creative and just pumping out tons of music from their bedroom or their basement, or they're just blocked and they're kind of bummed out that they can't do anything. So you seem to be in that first category where you've been able to actually, produce a lot of content despite the difficulties of being in a pandemic.
Yeah, well, I mean, right now I'm still working like full time during the pandemic, but it is keeping me busy while I'm at home because due to the limitations that I have for seeing people and things like that, and also because with the restrictions, I'm pretty much in a position where I don't really want to go outside or
Sure.
anything as such. So I'm kind of thankful that I have like all the necessities I have in my basement just to make, above average sounding like albums.
Yeah.
So I feel kind of grateful in that respect.
Did you have experience on the production side of things before this as well?
Yeah, actually 10 years ago, I actually attended a school here in Winnipeg, and everyone knows it as Mid-Ocean or
Oh, sure.
Mosma.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I attended there, didn't really graduate on like the highest marks, but then over the years, I kind of started like honing in and redeveloping my skills, and I guess everything just kind of started sinking in um, as time went on. And I was just practicing by doing like cover songs and uh, trying to write my own original songs, but never really went anywhere with them. So, but yeah, I just kind of kept practicing the skills after I graduated.
Okay. One of the things that I think probably drew me to your record in the first place was the cover art,
Mm-hmm.
and then not only that, but it goes beyond that. I mean, the song titles and the content of the record. I know that that kind of mythological aspects are a big thing in a lot of genres of metal. But what is it about that draws you in? Like, what sparks your interest in doing that kind of material? Because it's cool, and I mean, it definitely has an appeal. But how deep do you have to get into the mythology of what you're singing about and what you're writing about in order to actually produce this kind of stuff?
Well, I had to get pretty deep because prior to writing that album, um, the whole basis of Primordial Serpent was actually inspired by a video game I used to play called Dark Souls,
Okay.
and as with Calamite as well. But the thing is, I wanted to branch out and try to write about other stuff that was not really tied to the game. So I was reading up on like a lot of like uh, stories in Norse mythology, and I
Yeah.
thought like, oh, this would be kind of cool if I like wrote my own like album based around this stuff and kind of see if I can depart myself away from the tropes of being like a Dark Souls inspired black metal band. So um so yeah, I just decided one day, just kind of started like reading up on like the different like serpents in the mythology and started reading on like different stories, and I thought this would be just kind of cool to make my own little black metal album out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it is they are cool stories too. A lot of that Norse stuff is really interesting,
Oh,
and can get
absolutely.
pretty dark too, right? Which is suitable content. I mean, for the type of music you're playing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like the story of I mean, I know there's a band called Amon Amarth that did their own little thing based around the story of Jormungandr and Thor, but
Right.
the story of like how Thor, not Thor, Odin's eye, for instance, is really dark. Even like the story of like Fenrir the
Yeah, the
wolf,
wolf.
which
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, which I called He Who Dwells in the Marshes. There's a lot of really dark like content in Norse mythology that I thought I would just make cool for a black metal album.
Yeah, well, it fits for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess just to step away from that record for a minute, what is Dungeon Synth? Because I know I saw that you were a Dungeon Synth artist as well, and
Yeah.
I listened to it, so I have an idea based on hearing it, right? But how do you define that? Because that was my first encounter with that genre. Black metal, I've definitely heard over the years. I'm
Yeah.
not super into it, but I know enough of it to be able to recognize it. But Dungeon Synth was a completely new one on me.
Well, Dungeon Synth, I guess the best way to put it is just dark ambient music that kind of got popular from black metal artists.
Okay, okay.
People that kind of were known for doing it in the beginning were like artists like Mortis, and everyone's favorite, and I'm saying this very loosely because no one really likes this guy very much, but Burzum was kind of
Oh
one
yeah,
of the other
yeah.
ones.
Well,
Yeah,
there's good
with
reasons why no one likes that guy very much, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah,
He's definitely one of those artists where like you definitely got to like separate art from artist in order
totally.
to
Yeah,
like his
yeah.
music. But then he did his albums in prison, the Dottie Balders and the Halid Skelf being the other one. But basically, it's just dark ambient music that was just made by black metal musicians. And then as time went on, it kind of, I guess, developed its own sound that was very black metal inspired. And it was just, I guess, a lot of artists, I guess, in that genre just decided to experiment with like just making like ambient synth music with it. I'm not really too sure on what it is, but basically from what I described, it's just like dark ambient synth with just like fantasy and sort of like black metal style production to it
Okay,
that just
okay.
grew popular from black metal. So
Did you have any background in playing with synths and stuff like that before this?
I did actually for
Okay.
quite a while. I actually had a synth project. But it wasn't Dungeon Synth at all. It was actually more in the vein of like horror synth, like John Carpenter-esque kind of style
Okay.
synth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I had it called Neuronet, and I started that when I was about 24 24, 25, but I never really did anything with it. But basically, it was just that style of like 80s like synth music that I made. And I'd say about in 2019, I got kind of, I wouldn't say tired of it, but I kind of exhausted myself with it and wanted to take a break from it. So then one of my friends actually had recommended to me, why don't you try making dungeon synth? So I was like, oh yeah, I could try making dungeon synth. Absolutely. So then on my last Near Net record, I actually made a dungeon synth album that was called In the Depths of Nargothrond, which is based off of J.R.R. Tolkien's book, The Silmarillion.
Okay, yeah,
And I said, you know what, if I was going to continue this, I'm not going to use NeuroNet for a dungeon synth name because that just doesn't really fit. So one day I was like playing Dark Souls and I was like, oh man, I should like have like a Dark Souls inspired like dungeon synth project. So then one day I came across the name Calamite, which is one of the bosses from the video games, and he's actually one of the toughest guys in the games. And I was like, oh man, this name is perfect. I'm going to use this as my name. And then I downloaded some sample pack that was made by another dungeon synth artist named Arong.
okay.
And I've been using his sample packs for my stuff like almost ever since. Also with combining like taking and recording samples from my own keyboard and just making my own tracks like ever since.
Is there like sort of a big underground community for this stuff? I assume the internet is an excellent way to sort of, like you're saying, you're downloading these sample packs and stuff, right?
There is a pretty big underground community on Facebook. There's actually two groups that I'm a part of. One's just called Dungeon Synth, and the other one's called Dungeon Synth Cult.
Okay.
And both, I think Dungeon Synth has like somewhere around like 8,000 users in it. I think the Cult one has about the same. But yeah, there also is like events that have been playing on Twitch for the last little while. For as long as I've been active in it, called the Northeast Dungeon Siege, which I think is based out of Boston. But
Okay.
it's basically like a live stream event where dungeon synth artists have like little sets and they just play them on Twitch, and yeah, it's pretty much about it.
Well, between Twitch and like you're saying, you were heavily influenced by this video game earlier. I wouldn't have expected a big crossover between gaming and this kind of stuff, but I guess it makes sense. Is that where a lot of the community for dungeon synth stuff is, like within like crossover with the gaming community?
Nowadays it seems like that, but back then it was just more basically people just experimenting with synth sounds and kind of becoming more influenced from like fantasy works from like various different like authors such as like J.R.R. Tolkien and all these other fantasy authors. But basically it was just them messing around and playing around on keyboards and just kind of creating dark ambient like medievalish sounding music. Nowadays you actually see a lot more themed based dungeon synth artists. I'm actually not the only Dark Souls based dungeon synth artist, and also not the only Dark Souls inspired black metal artist too. But it seems to me that it's trying to it's trying to become more theme based with a lot of the music that's being created. So yeah, I would say video games is easily one of them. There are some people that still use have like just things like nature being one of their influences and movies being their influences, but video games is definitely one that's now becoming, I guess, like part of or being accepted as part of the dungeon synth community.
Well, it seems like it has the potential to be something that could be very cinematic kind of in scope, right? That just the style of it, I mean, could be used to even to like soundtrack a video game or a film or something like that.
Yeah,
seems like it has that potential.
Yeah, it's easily like it's like a score without the movie. That's basically what it is. And it definitely, when you listen to it, you do kind of generate your own kind of like fantasy kind of like mindsets and your own kind of like sense of escapism when you're listening to it. So it's easily basically like a movie score, but just without the movie. So yeah, it can easily be imagined like that.
Cool. Is Calamite something that can play live, or is it kind of the same situation where it's something you do as a recording project but aren't really considering
Partly I could play live. I would have to sync up certain tracks to be automated to turn on and turn off, and I wouldn't be able to play the whole entire thing. But yeah, I could probably play live actually doing that. So but it would just be me like I would be playing like certain parts, and certain parts would be being played from my computer, and that's it's probably close to live I can get with playing dungeon synth.
Does that stuff kind of take away from the, because I and this is could be based on my lack of deep knowledge of the genre, but I always picture black metal as being something very theatrical, just in the sense of the corpse paint and just like the visuals of it are so, it seems so important. And would a solo project like this, would it really fit with that kind of vibe? Like, are you able to, if you played live with either of these projects, would you go all out with the effects and the makeup and everything like that, or would you just go as yourself? And
Oh, absolutely, I would actually, because funny that you mentioned that, because just the other week I actually did a pre-recorded live session in my basement where I was in full black metal gear.
oh,
I
nice.
had the corpse paint on, I had my gauntlets on and everything. And so yeah, I would actually would take it live easily. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. That's good. That's good to hear, because I feel like it would be missing something, right? If you didn't have that element of it.
Yeah, because when I'm going to shows and stuff like that, I always like watching something that has like a bit of spectacle to it, because it makes it more engaging than just watching people on stage just in like their regular shorts and shirt, just kind of standing there strumming the same chords. But when you actually see like a band like Immortal, for instance, when they're all in their getup and everything like that, it makes it more memorable and more engaging. So yeah. And so yeah, if I was in a position where if I were to wear my corpse paint and stuff live, yeah, I would totally do it.
How long does it take to put that on, out of curiosity, the corpse paint? It
Well,
seems
I
like
have
an
it down.
intricate process, right?
When I first put it on, it took maybe, for me, because my corpse paint design is not the most complicated, but even then it still at the start took about 40 minutes. Now I have it down to a science and it takes me about 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who maybe aren't familiar, like, say you run into someone you haven't seen in a while, they hear you playing music and they don't know anything about black metal or dungeon synth or any of this stuff. How do you describe what it is that you do? Just in general as a musician, like, do you have an easy Cole's Notes kind of way to explain it to someone who maybe doesn't have any frame of reference for this stuff?
It depends. If someone's generally interested, I'll go into detail about it and say, like, yeah, it's a style of very raw sounding heavy metal music that emphasizes on kind of like a more lo-fi quality, and has a style of vocals that are more kind of shriek based, as if someone's more if someone's like almost like in like agonizing pain to an extent. And then I will give them like a couple examples. Like I'll list like, certain bands to check out would be like Dark Throne, or Immortal would be another one. And just give them like a handful of bands to check out to get my other sound. Sometimes I can be a little sarcastic and be like, yeah, it's just me going into a microphone and just wailing away on random chords. But I mean, it's obviously more than that, but
Sure.
That's if I'm on like that's if I'm like having a bad day and I just don't really want to talk to anybody.
Yeah, for sure. So what's your background in the local music scene? And the reason I ask is in part because, I've been doing this for like 8.5 years now. And I talk to people who are between the ages of like, 18 and 70, and so many different genres of music. And I'm always trying to place people in my head as to where they fit in within the local music scene, in the sense of, what were the bands that you started seeing when you first started going to shows locally?
Well, funny enough, because I actually didn't really start attending shows until I was in my mid to late 20s, so in the last few years. But I would say the bands that I've come to really enjoy in the metal scene, number one would be, well, Nocturnal Departure,
right?
And I've become very good friends with them.
I have one of their albums, actually.
Yeah, Cathartic Black Rituals. Yeah,
that might be it. It might be it. Yeah. So there's my pile of local CDs I got in the back.
Oh yeah, it's okay. Fair enough. Zombie Assault, I've become pretty good friends with Michael to Catch. He's a good guy. And who else? And Humed being another one as well.
Yeah.
So I become friends with a few of those guys, and I guess those people kind of influenced me to kind of start, working on my own metal project. So yeah, and that's all I can say about that.
Yeah. Well, when was the first time that you played a show? Like, was it with Dojo Cobra, or was it with somebody else?
It was with Dojo Cobra, actually, and it was with Spine of Earth, I believe, over at Bulldog Pizza.
Oh yeah.
And then we didn't play a show after that for many months on end until Kevin joined the group, and then we had like one at the Crescent Fort Rouge Church, which was awesome, actually. One of my favorite experiences playing drone metal in a church. Then we played the was it Chadstock?
Okay, Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had a few other shows after that, one with Wilt and uh, Thrallfrost, I believe. I think they're from
Okay.
North Dakota. And Sleeping Legion, I think, was like a week later. And then we ended up having another show with Ogama for I think it was a Halloween show.
Cool.
And yeah.
How do you feel that your solo stuff, these two projects you have, how are they kind of received by people within the local metal scene?
The Dungeon Synth stuff people don't really know about.
Okay.
And the Primordial Serpent, I think it's fairly well received within the local scene, but it's gone way beyond Winnipeg, which took me even by surprise, because I have people in like the States that are like massively into like Primordial Serpent. I have people in
Awesome.
Europe that were into it. I actually shipped off like a bunch of like stuff yesterday to people in the States, which was kind of crazy. So it's, I would say actually it has more success online than it does locally. But as far as a lot of the people that I'm friends with on Facebook, I think they genuinely like it. And I think it's pretty well received here too. So yeah.
Cool. But that's cool to hear about the people in other countries digging it too, because I mean, it's a perfect situation for that to happen, where everyone's locked down. I mean, people are going to the internet to find music because you can't see any live music, and
Yeah.
you obviously they're whatever you're doing is hitting the right notes in their brains.
Well, yeah,
and
because I think it also, because it all pretty much started with Calamite, because Calamite's a lot of like underground labels that put out Dungeon Synth also put out like black metal as well. So I guess when they got word that, hey, the guy behind Calamite is now doing a black metal project,
sure.
I guess word really took off. And then I tried, and then I went around and just like, sending it to labels. And I think that was really what kicked it off. And then I also sent it around to like a couple like YouTube promoter channels, one being called Order of the Black Arts and another one called This is Black Metal.
Okay.
And and those two channels, like, because I think with the amount of hits I had on there, I think my first album, I think, has like 1,300 hits, but I think my newest one, Ancient Myths and Legends, has like 2,500 to 3,000 hits.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So I think it was just like a combination of all those things that just made it explode from Winnipeg out into the world. So yeah. And it is really neat that it's that my music has done way more traveling than me in my life. So
yeah. So how do you follow this up then? I mean, because there's no one has any end in sight to the pandemic, and primordial. I can't even say the word primordial today. It's slipping off my. But it's a project, like you said. It's something you're basically, it's a home recording project, right? So
yep.
What's the next step? Are you already working on a follow up to this record, or what are you planning to do?
Well, it's funny that you actually mentioned that, because just a few hours ago, Hellmoon and I just released news of a split release that we were doing, and which is coming out on a label called Gems Label on April 24th. But yeah, as far as music goes, I'm just still going to continue doing my thing. I'm still going to continue writing music and still make tracks and send it out to labels, either for compilation purposes or for full album purposes. So yeah, I'm still probably going to continue doing it.
Oh, that's good. It's good to hear. If someone wants to find out more about your music, maybe they're hearing about you for the first time, what's the best way to find it online? I mean, what would you prefer someone to do to find it online?
You can easily find it on YouTube. If you just type in Primordial Serpent Black Metal, you'll get like a ton of results with all my albums on there. I also have a Bandcamp as well called like primordialserpent.bandcamp.com.
Okay.
They want to hear it on there too. But yeah, YouTube and Bandcamp. I also have a Spotify as well. All my stuff is on Spotify to listen to. So if they just search that, they can be able to easily find it. So yeah, just Spotify, Bandcamp, I guess Instagram too, and Facebook and YouTube. So yeah, just those few sources.
Are you, is it difficult to maintain, social media accounts and things for these different projects at the same time? Because I know you have one for Calamite and you have one for Primordial Serpent, right?
I don't find it too difficult. It's the only thing I actually have difficulty with is if some people want to message me, they'll like message me on like one out of the two of them, and then I'll be like, oh, I didn't get that message. And like, oh, I messaged you on Primordial Serpent about it. Oh, okay, let me go my Primordial Serpent account. Oh, okay, for sure. And then sometimes if they'll message me something in regards to Calamite, they'll message me on Primordial Serpent, and I'm like, right. Oh, okay, let me go back to my Calamite account. But it's not really all that difficult actually, because Calamite is not quite as I would say as active as Primordial Serpent, primarily because I'm more fluent with playing guitar and bass than I actually am with playing synth music. And I kind of find with Calamite, I really have to stay focused in front of the keyboard in order to actually create like a good sounding track.
Okay.
Whereas with like Primordial Serpent, I'm sitting on my couch playing like random riffs and just kind of getting ideas. But no, I don't really find it that hard to juggle the multiple accounts actually. So
Is there potential for these two projects to merge at any point? Like, do you foresee any of the dungeon synth stuff blending into the black metal stuff, or are you keeping them deliberately separate?
you know what? I don't that may be a possibility. I mean, I might just keep them separate for the sake of it, but I have experimented with having like synth music in Primordial Serpent, especially on my last album. Like the intro to the album is pretty much like a dark ambient like synth
totally
thing that I made. And even the intro that I had on my first album, Ascension of the Dark Age, that was pretty much almost like a straight up like dungeon synth kind of track. So I might have like snippets of like synths in my tracks, but I don't know if I will go on and fully combine the two.
Okay.
So
cool.